What drives change? A youth uprising or a power vacuum? What exposes hypocrisy? Sanctions on Russia or silence on China? Who has the credibility to lecture India and who doesn't? And what can a phone call between India and Rome tell us about the future of global trade? Good evening, I'm Vanya and this is the Worldview through Bharat's lens. Tonight, 4 stories, 1 thread: power, perception, and the choices that shape our world. We begin in Nepal, where a political storm has reshaped the nation. For the first time in history, Nepal has a woman Prime Minister. Sushila Karki, a former Chief Justice, has taken charge as interim leader. Her appointment follows weeks of turmoil. The KP Sharma Oli government collapsed under the weight of Gen Z protests, youth-led demonstrations that began as an anti-corruption movement but turned explosive when Oli tried to silence dissent with a social media ban. The crackdown backfired, violence erupted, parliament buildings were attacked, leaders' homes set on fire, dozens killed, hundreds injured. The army had to step in to rescue Oli himself. Amid this chaos, one name rose to the top: Sushila Karki. Backed by protesters, acceptable to traditional parties, chosen through a public vote on Discord. A symbol of how deeply this movement belongs to the youth, Karki now leads an interim government tasked with restoring order and preparing Nepal for general elections in March 2026. Her rise has ignited hope for a corruption-free future, and naturally, the neighbors were watching closely. India moved first. Prime Minister Narendra Modi congratulated Karki, reaffirming that India remains firmly committed to Nepal's peace, progress, and prosperity. The Ministry of External Affairs echoed this, calling Nepal a close neighbor, a fellow democracy, and a long-term partner. This is not the first time India has had to walk a fine line with Nepal. The 2015 blockade, the controversy around Nepal's constitution. These memories still shape Kathmandu's view of New Delhi, which is why India's words mattered, sometimes drawing accusations of interference. Now compare that with China. Beijing took its time. When it finally spoke, its statements was vague. No reference to the deaths, no mention of the protest, just a call for stability and order. Classic China, strategic silence, carefully avoiding any stand that might alienate Nepal's communist leaders. For Beijing, it's about influence, not empathy. So here you have it, 2 neighbors, 2 very different approaches. India, quick, emotional, bound by people-to-people ties. China, calculated, cautious, waiting for the dust to settle. And Nepal? Nepal stands at a crossroad. A new leader, born of a youth uprising, carrying the weight of expectation. The question now is, as Kathmandu rebuilds, will it lean on India's embrace or China's shadows? For now, one thing is certain: Sushila Karki is not just Nepal's first woman Prime Minister, she is the face of a generation's fight for change. If Kathmandu is rewriting politics with protest, Washington is rewriting trade rules with tariffs. The world's richest democracies are talking tough again. The G7 finance ministers held a call to discuss new ways to punish Russia for its war in Ukraine. But this time, the conversation is not just about Russia. It's about countries buying Russian oil, nations that the West now calls enablers. On the table, more sanctions, new tariffs, and perhaps the most controversial, penalties on countries like India and China. Washington wants its allies to follow its lead and impose tariffs on those who continue purchasing Russian crude. The US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was very clear: cut off the money at the source or this war will never end. But there's a catch. America's rules are never uniform. President Donald Trump has slapped India with extra tariffs, 50% duties on Indian goods. Trade talks between the 2 democracies are already sour. Yet, when it comes to China, the US is suddenly cautious. Why? Because Washington and Beijing are in the middle of a very fragile trade truce. So India gets punished, China gets managed. The hypocrisy is hard to miss. The US is pressuring New Delhi to stop buying discounted Russian oil. that India needs to keep its economy stable. But Beijing, the largest buyer of Russian crude, faces no American tariffs. Instead, US officials are flying to Madrid to hold more talks with Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng, discussing TikTok, trade, and money laundering. Meanwhile, G7 leaders also floated another idea, using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defense. In other words, taking Moscow's immobilized wealth and turning it into weapons for Kiev. So here we are. The G7 wants to tighten the screws on Russia, but in doing so, it risks alienating the world's largest economies outside the West. Tariffs on India, talks with China, and pressure on everyone else to fall in line. The question is, will this economic pressure break Putin's war machine, or will it break the global trade system first? And while the West talks sanctions, India is talking back, this time to Switzerland. Now we move on to Geneva at the UN Human Rights Council. Switzerland, the country of chocolates, watches, and snowy mountains, decided to give India a lecture on minorities and freedom of expression. India's response? Direct, sharp, and unapologetic. Kshitiz Tyagi, India's counselor at the UN, called Switzerland's remarks shallow and ill-informed. He said, instead of wasting the Council's time with false narratives, Switzerland should focus on its problems: racism, systematic discrimination, and xenophobia. And he's right. This is a country where migrants face hostility, where Muslims face discrimination, and where racism in football makes headlines. Switzerland is hardly in a position to preach. What makes it more interesting is the backdrop. India and Switzerland are not adversaries, the ties are deepening. Just this year they sealed a trade deal, the TEPA, expected to bring a $100 billion in investments and create 1 million jobs. Switzerland ratified it in July. The partnership is stronger than ever, which makes this public rebuke even more striking. And India didn't stop there. Tyagi also turned the spotlight on Pakistan. He reminded the Council of Pakistan's terror record and said India needs no lessons from a terror sponsor, no sermons from a persecutor of minorities, and no advice from a state that has squandered its own credibility. The sharpest line? He called Pakistan's fixation on India's existential validation and compared it to a dump truck, recycling falsehoods and propaganda at every session. But let's not forget, India has faced such criticism before. From Manipur to Kashmir, the UN has raised questions, and India's response has always been consistent. External sermons are unwarranted, misleading, and politically motivated. The message from Geneva tonight is clear. Switzerland, fix your racism. Pakistan, stop abusing the forum. And to everyone else, don't confuse criticism with credibility. This is India making its case with spine. But diplomacy is not about rebuttals. It's about building bridges, and that's where Italy comes in. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni, and on the agenda were three things: trade, peace, and connectivity. India and the European Union are working on a free trade agreement stalled for 8 years but revived in 2022. Negotiations are underway in New Delhi right now, and the target is to seal the deal by the end of the year. Italy is pursuing for it, and Modi thanked Meloni for her proactive support. Why does this matter? Because access to the EU, the world's largest trading bloc, could open new doors to Indian exports. Second, peace. Modi and Meloni also discussed the war in Ukraine. Both leaders reaffirmed their commitment to ending the conflict. Lofty words, yes, but Europe is paying the price of this war, and India has positioned itself as a voice of reason. And third, connectivity. The IMEEC, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, announced at the G20 summit in Delhi, this is being pitched as an alternative to China's Belt and Road. Roads, railways, shipping routes, linking India to Europe via the Middle East. If implemented, it could transform supply chains and shift the balance of influence. So here's the bigger picture. India wants Europe, Europe wants India, and Italy is becoming the bridge. The question is, will Brussels match Delhi's urgency, and will IMEEC move from paper to reality? We will be watching. So here's the picture tonight. Nepal is at crossroads, the G7 is exposing its double standards. India is refusing to be lectured and Europe is turning to Bharat for trade and connectivity. The world is shifting and through Bharat's lens, one thing is clear. We will question, we will counter and we will carve our place in the global order. I'm Vanya and this has been the World View through Bharat's lens only on YMCA Sanchar.